Welcome back to another episode of the Israel Connection. Ever since October 7th, Israel is at war. Things are unclear, very vague, and it is become increasingly more and more difficult to cover everything that's happening, but we're still going to do our best to provide that with this episode. Here we go. Hello, and welcome to another Israel Connection. As what seems to be a consistent case, every time I am planning something for this discussion, I'm preparing a subject to talk about, and I found and do my research to find more and interesting details to not just focus on news coming from Israel, but also how does that impact here. Obviously, it doesn't matter anymore. Every time something else coming up and just scrambles everything. I initially wanted to talk more today about the motion in Congress that has passed about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. I thought that would be a very, very, very interesting conversation to have regarding to the definitions and what people here are thinking about this. But there's no way we can do anything related to Israel without talking about the incidents happened this weekend. Throughout this weekend, during the military operation in Gaza, three hostages, Yotam, Alon, and Samil, were killed by misfire, by friendly fire from IDF forces. And it's been difficult. It's been devastating on so many levels for everybody, I know. And there's so many things that makes this even worse than it is. The anticipation, the willing, the looking forward, the thinking, the thought about that they were this close to be rescued, and they were already encountering IDF forces that could have rescued them and made their way peacefully into Israel, and they eventually ended up dead in Gaza. It's just extremely difficult. And I spent a lot of time this weekend try and get more information about that incident. And I wanted to have for you an opportunity to talk about this specifically, and also to share the perspective I personally have from military operation in Gaza, to try and give you a little bit of insight into the environment that this incident has happened within, and the people that were part of this. So starting with just a description of the event, the three hostages, Yotam, Alon, and Samil, seems to be escaped their captives at some point, maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks earlier, and will manage to survive. This happened in Sajaiya. Sajaiya is in the northern part of the Strip, an area that we believe to be under full control of the IDF, while in fact is still infused heavily with bloody battles. We hear almost every day about more and more casualties in the northern part of the Strip as part of the exchange of fire between the IDF and Hamas. And this is a very, very difficult area. It is an area that has mined houses, that has traps that are just waiting for IDF soldiers to come in and die in it. And also we're talking about a mindset of 2 months inside of military operation, meaning a mindset of people living 2 months under heavy fire and constant conflict with armed groups. And I could not think throughout this whole weekend. The only thing I could think of is how the guy that made the shot feels like. How the guy that made the misfire feels like. And I heard that he's receiving mental support at the moment, because I can tell you for sure no punishment in the world is worse than what he is feeling. But it also raises good questions regarding to the IDF policies and the way they react right now in the situation, in the military presence. Is the IDF trained to what to do with hostages? Are we prepared for the day that we're going to find more and more hostages in combatant environment, in an environment that still has terrorists in it? And I wanted to talk about the mentality of war, because that's something I've experienced personally. And there's a lot here. There's so much to unpack in this one incident that was so devastating, that I think is also crucial to talk about. And first is the personal perspective. In 2014, I was still in my mandatory military service. I was in the logistics corps, and my job was just in general to take care of logistics, to take care of equipment, and under conditions of war, under conditions of חירום, of emergency, we transferred the entire battalion into a fighting battalion, and we went inside Gaza. I spent 2 months in the Gaza envelope. My job was to insert ammunition into Gaza and take out empty shells and like things that can be recycled and reused in warfare. And in 2 months of constant fire, constant missiles and rockets fired at us. By the way, the area that we stayed in outside of the border, outside of the Gaza Strip, was Be'eri Forest, was the camp of Reim, which also followed me afterwards in life as being part of this traumatic connection. But the mentality that you had after a month of war, after a month of constant fighting, is something that is very, very difficult to understand. The room for mistakes grows every day, because once you're getting used to a routine, once you're getting used to a certain environment, you're getting your guard down at some point. For us, throughout the 2 months that we were in there, at some point we removed our vests, our bulletproof vests, because we thought, I'm sweating all day. If something's gonna happen, that's not what's gonna save me, and there's no reason to keep on that on. And then one of the worst incidents of 2014 was that a missile hit a military tent inside the Gaza, in the Gaza envelope, and killed 8 people. And I was there when that happened. It happened in front of me. But that mentality, from one hand, the extreme cautious you have towards everything around you, everything that moves, everything that flinches, captures your eye for a minute, for a second. And at the same time, you're raising some form of a mentality that you're getting used to. And as longer as this goes, that creates more and more room for errors, because you're getting used to the extreme. You're getting used to the emergency of stuff. You're getting used to the violence almost. And that's what it becomes a risk. And there's a definition in the IDF between an incident and an accident. Because an incident, meaning we could have prevented it. An accident, meaning it was inevitable. And the definition between the two of them is very, very strong, because that can tell you if the person to blame on eventually will be punished for the actions or not. And we're all obviously waiting to hear more information about that specific event that happened last weekend. But I can tell you that in a mentality of extreme environment like this, it's harder and harder to make decisions. I've heard that in one of the notices the IDF gave, he was saying we should refresh our protocol regarding to the way we handled surviving incident and encountering hostages and what you do when you do that. But I think in addition to that, also, last weekend was the first time that the two goals IDF has set for this military ground operation did not align with each other, but actually went head to head. Destroying Hamas, disarming Hamas, and with safe returning all the hostages. And this weekend was the first time that those two didn't align with each other. And everybody is impacted by this. You can see it on the streets. You could see it in on everyone's faces. This weekend was devastating for a lot of people. And I had a bit of a conversation with Jeff earlier to this session where he mentioned he saw in one of the surveys that the IDF has more friendly fire reported than other militaries in the world. Now, I haven't got a chance to really look at the details on that one. But there's two things we need to take in account when we're looking at IDF actions and IDF in general. The first one is no other country in the world has that many military engagements, has that much combat going on, ongoing for 75 years. No country needs that many, has that many incidents happening where live fire is being shot. And second thing is, not a lot of countries have mandatory military service. Not a lot of countries' armies are consistent of 18-year-olds. And I always found that to be very, very interesting. I remember before I joined the military, before I drafted to the IDF, I was part of a delegation to Montreal when I was 17. Both me and Rotem did the same program. And at the age of 17, we had the opportunity to meet with teenagers from Montreal. We were both 17. We spent a couple of weeks together, and we had an opportunity to talk to each other and to see, what's on the mind. For us, as 17-year-olds from Beersheba, we talked about the missiles that are fired at Beersheba. We talked about what we're going to do in the IDF and what's the proposed position each one got, because at the age of 16 is the first time you're doing like a test that will eventually lead up to what will be your position in the IDF. And by the age of 17, you're already getting like your proposed position. And we saw what other 17-year-olds are thinking of, that they're not in Israel. They thought of parties. They thought of having fun. They thought about getting drunk, even though it's 17. Canada is 18, illegal drinking age. And I feel like that difference, when you're looking at IDF soldiers eventually, you need to take that in account as well. When you're thinking about the mistakes, when you're thinking about the human factor here that exists, and the stress that lives within everybody who is in the military environment right now, fearing that every single mistake you'd make can create an international incident. When you take all of those into account and you think about what's happened there, it's almost inevitable to expect that there will be mistakes. And that's something that I'm still getting used to kind of like go over. The fact that when I was in the military and I was promoted to captain, I am ranked captain in the military. I'm a platoon commander in reserve as well. I was called back, obviously, and we had that conversations before, and I chose at the moment to stay here. And I say at the moment because I think that decision is still hard to make in general. So every single day we're choosing to stay here until that changes. And it's hard. It's hard because when I was in the military, when I was in service, that mentality that every mistake you make is crucial, and every mistake you make costs life. That's hard. And that takes a long time to kind of like release. And to think about the mixture you have there of both mandatory military servants, 18 and 19-year-olds that are in Gaza, and in addition, reservists that are 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70, by the way. Some still serve at the age of 75. Shai's dad, by the way, Shai Ashkenazi, the Shaliach here, is in reserves. He's 75. It's a different mentality. Yeah, go ahead, Gabe. Sorry for keeping you too long.
No, I can't think of anything more eloquent than what you've described, presented from your personal experience. I mean, I've never seen combat. I've never been in the service. My father was an Army reporter during World War II. But I mean, I've heard of the fog of war, where you're just in an environment where in the moment you just are not sure what's going on. And the other thing I've heard from some commander, I don't remember Civil War or World War I or World War II, is that plans are what you have until the first shot is fired, and then things just change. But I wanted to talk about maybe two different things. One is I sent a link to a New York Times article in the last day or so that gives a historical perspective. And it talks about what's been going on for the last 75 years and what was going on before that. And it just talks about how both sides have been affected by two people trying to live in the same place and not always having it very peacefully. But more disturbing was listening last night, late at night. I think I was hearing a rerun of one of the Sunday shows, and they're talking about what seemed to be documented examples of IDF soldiers doing bad things. And war is hell and soldiers are people, and things will happen, and bad things will happen. But coming back to what you said, that every incident, every accident has the potential to be a worldwide news and affect world events. Um, it's just very, very disturbing to hear some of the stories that are being told. Obviously, there's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's lies, but some of it seems to be substantiated. Some of the stories seem to be substantiated of soldiers, by choice, perhaps because they've been in combat for 2 months, perhaps because of exactly the kind of constant stress, and knowing what happened on October 7th, and knowing what's happening to their colleagues, and going through things that like you saw, where you saw comrades killed in front of you, and what kind of effect is that going to have on people? The problem is that when it plays out in looking for retribution against people who were not involved in the action, the innocent people. And I understand Hamas is embedding among civilians, and it's almost impossible to tell who's a combatant. But some of the stories, and I'm sure that more details will come out, either validating or debunking them. But it just seems that there's potentially a lot of bad things that have been done, and I just find that very disheartening. I mean, I believe in the IDF. I've given to friends of the IDF in the United States and Magen David Adom, and support all of the wonderful organizations. And so it's just disheartening to hear potentially stories that undermine the credibility of what Israel is doing. And the final point is just something that has really annoyed me since the very beginning, where people complain about what the army is doing or what Netanyahu is doing or even what Biden is doing. And they say, well, they shouldn't be doing that. They should be doing everything to get the hostages out. And then they stop talking. And they never say what should be done. They're just armchair experts talking about how what is being done is wrong, but they don't have anything better to do.
Yeah. First, and this is personally for me, I'm done believing New York Times. I don't think that they're unbiased. I don't think that they're truthful. And I think that they actively permitting anti-Semitism and permitting lies and permitting discrimination against Jews. And I don't read the New York Times anymore. And I know I said many times on this session specifically how important it is to show the wide variety of opinions and to extend our views and to see as many perspectives as possible in order to get the unbiased truth. But after seeing the amount of articles about how devastated lives in Gaza are and how few articles about the victims of October 7th is, I'm done believing the New York Times is a credible source. That's my personal opinion on this one. I don't want to encourage or discourage anybody to pursue other media channels. For me, I'm going to view it as propaganda. I'm going to look at the New York Times as propaganda.
Who's I don't dispute what you're saying. Whose propaganda do you think it is? Propaganda in service of who or what?
That's a good question. Who are the forces that we're looking at? Who are the players in this environment that we're viewing, right? That's a good question. I think that a lot of that mentality has shifted opinions into try and view the reality as it is not. Every single newspaper has its own agenda. Every international media actor is by its own. They have their owners, they have their investors, they have their readers. That's a whole community, and that's something you are also taught in business school. Every single organization is an environment, and it has all of those different factors exist in it. But when you live a reality where you're not allowing other opinions to echo through, when you're only echoing one single opinion, when you're creating an echo chamber of one opinion, that opinion becomes more and more extreme. And personally, I think that was the case in the New York Times. We've heard about, are you familiar with Barry Weiss and her story? Anybody
Not
want to
really.
share?
I know the name, but I can't remember the story.
Yeah. Jeff, I saw you nodding. Do you want to share or do you want me to? Okay. So Barry Weiss was working for the New York Times. She's a Jewish woman, lives in New York, and fitted in very, very well with the New York Times environment. She was writing about tourism and tourism opportunities. And she wanted to write a piece about Israel, about tourism in Israel, and about some interesting sites that should be very, very interesting for people who want to see. After her piece that she posted, she got such a bad lashback, both from the readers and from the editors, that the editor had to make an editor note after her article apologizing for mentioning Israel in the piece and not mentioning the Palestinian conflict as well. She wrote about tourism in Israel. She was working for the New York Times for, I think, over 10 years. And after that incident, she decided to quit. She is I think she's no different than any other Jewish Americans in like at least in the East Coast, right? She's liberal, she's democratic, you could even like put her under the umbrella of progress. She's also married to another. I mean, there's nothing in it that could make other people think that she doesn't belong, at least in this environment of the New York Times, apart from her connection to Israel and her Jewish identity. And when you're allowing that environment to grow, and when you're permitting other voices from being heard, and we know very well what happens when you're only listening to one voice and one opinion, you're creating an environment that eventually enables that to happen. And I feel like New York Times today is the result of that, is the result of a toxic, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist environment that disables them completely from viewing the reality as a truth. And that's why I don't read the New York Times anymore. It doesn't mean they're not a valuable source. It does not mean that some of the things that they share it's true. I always going to view them as propaganda, as dishonest, and there's many different actors here, and each one is different. But that's my personal experience with the New York Times. But there's no one people. There's no like one man behind the scenes that kind of like, pulls the strings and shift things in its surroundings to make it seems like they hate Israel or they hate Jews. I think there are probably some people who tries to do that, but it also a result of an echoing environment, to my personal belief.
Dane, can I interrupt? Say something?
Yeah, of course.
I'm over the phone, so I can't see you and I can't wave. I just wanted to add. I think we need to differentiate between opinion and what becomes a fact because of this opinion, and we really, really need to be careful about that.
You're right. You're right, and I try to differentiate as much as possible, at least my own.
Yeah, I know.
But it's also harder and harder to try and differentiate the two of them, because again, each news source is going to be biased. Each news source has an agenda at some point, and it's harder to find the differences between the two of them. There's no doubt that mistakes are being made. There's no doubt people make mistakes. IDF soldiers makes mistakes. And there's no doubt some of them are angry and some of them are acting out of their duty. That's reality. There's no doubt that that is happening. Whether or not it is something that is promoted by the IDF or something that is systematically enabled, I don't think that's the case, both from personal perspective as someone who served in the IDF for 4.5 years and still serves in reserves. I can tell you that the morality and the values that the IDF trains their soldiers based on permits from any type of these incidents to happen. It doesn't change the fact that people are angry, people are hurting, and people are less empathetic for the other side right now. That's the results of October 7th. It doesn't mean that it is allowed or that it is even understood or goes unpunished, but it is also part of the human factor that exists in the IDF, and it's that these are people. And those are people who lost friends and families that are fighting in Gaza, and they still do their utmost to prevent from harming civilians, and mistakes happens. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'm on the Horetz email list. It's probably abridged because I don't pay for the subscription. What do you think of them in general? I know they're a little bit maybe left of center.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that they are? Do you think that editorial wise and reporting wise? What do you think of them in general? Do you agree with their editorial policy or?
Good question. On I'm not a big fan of Haaretz, but I will say that at least right now, keeping up with the Israeli media probably going to be more consistent for you to try and get the news. Whether or not they're the most unbiased or the most dedicated to the truth, I don't think anyone is at the moment, but at least Israeli media is more consistent in reporting. If on
Okay,
international media you're going to hear articles just if something extreme happened, and you're going to miss a lot of the nuances that are very, very important in order to understand the reality, then Haaretz, Jerusalem Post, Israel Times, all of those are good sources. Each one of them has its own biases, but they're all going to be much more consistently on reporting.
okay. On Thursday, I might got a mass email from the JCRC. I was on a Zoom webinar. It was sponsored by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Ever hear of that think tank? They said that they're pro-Israel. I think they're probably a little bit more. I don't think they're extra. I don't know if. I don't think they're maybe necessarily pro-Likud. They're probably maybe lean more towards the center in Israeli politics. Ever hear of this think tank? The
I'll have to
Washington
look it
Institute.
up.
Okay, it was founded by Martin Innick and also Dennis Ross. Dennis Ross. He was a negotiator. I think maybe during the Clinton administration.
Mhm.
He's a state that he used to work for the State Department. Maybe some of the people in the group know about the group and Dennis Ross because I think he's involved in the group.
Okay.
Does anyone want to give any insights or?
Were you or were you not at at the at this event that happened on Thursday?
No.
Mm.
What happened on Thursday?
You said there was the JCRC event with the
Well,
Washington.
I don't know if it was. I don't know. I might get an email from the JCRC
Okay.
that gave a link to this event. I get I get so many emails from various Jewish groups.
Yeah.
So I think they just give links to various groups.
Anybody participate in this event that want to share?
I did not participate in the event. I do know Dennis Ross, and I think this organization purports to be a balanced perspective, not leaning right or left. I'm looking at their website now and some of the leadership, and it's well-respected people from my perspective. But I was not part of the event.
What's the name of the institute again?
It is the Washington Institute for Near East Policy.
All right. Let's encourage everybody to take a look. Sounds interesting. Let's see if we can find something. I'll see if there's any events coming up from their perspective. Should be good. Any more comments or reactions that you want to add about last weekend?
I just want to add a comment about Barry Weiss. She's quite brilliant, and I would encourage you all to read her book, How to Fight Anti-Semitism, read some of her publications. She now has founded an organization called the Free Press, and she recently gave a speech to, I think it was the Heritage Foundation on anti-Semitism, which was quite brilliant. And that's not her typical audience. So I would encourage you all to look into Barry Weiss a little bit. And I appreciate Dean's perspective on the New York Times. But I think the thing I want everybody to come away from this conversation with regarding media is that every media source is biased in some way, and those biases also shift over time. So I think it's important to consume a range of media so that you can make your own opinions as opposed to simply being guided by one source.
I agree. Okay. I think that the discussion about Zionism and anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism will push forward to the next session, which means it might never happen because who knows what's going to happen until next session. It's 3 weeks from now. We're going to be looking at a different world. Instead, I wanted to also talk a little about positive things that happen. We're encouraged every week to find more positive things to try and lift ourselves up. And I think one of the most remarkable thing I was ever be fortunate enough to participate was the delegation we had here last week. In about a week and a half notice, we got together to host a delegation of October 7th survivor. Daniel, Orin, Sharon, and Yael came here and visited us last week on Wednesday. They came to the entire DC area for a week. They did a day at DC, a day with us, a day in Maryland, in Rockville, and a weekend in Delaware, where they participated in numerous events, sharing their story and giving a testimony. And I can say that from a personal perspective, that's definitely was one of the hardest conversations I ever had to moderate. Me and Zena moderated both of the conversations. We did one event for staff in the morning. We did 2 events open for the public. I think I saw the majority of you in one of those events, either the noon or the evening one. It was a tough week, but it felt very, very valuable. I feel like there were 2 goals for them coming here. One was for us to hear their story and to share it and to broadcast it and to, get as much exposure as possible to it. And I think we did. We had a lot of organizations joining in. We had media coming and covering at least the evening event. We had the Washington Jewish Week covering the noon, and we had Channel 4 covering the evening, NBC. We also recorded the event, and you're all more than welcome to watch it if you missed it. Very, very valuable and very important. But I think also the other goal was to show them the support that they get here. I talked to one of the delegates last night, Yael, and I asked her how was this experience for her. She said she felt like she was given a break from life, from life in Israel right now. She was able to get spoiled a little bit, get fed, stay in good places. She felt welcome. She felt hosted. And she felt encouraged and renewed in strength of seeing the amount of people that came to hear her story and show her the support. And I feel like that is as valuable. I think that we've talked a little bit about reverse shlichut from time to time, and not only about the effect the shlichim have here in the US, but also what happens when they get back and how they became advocates of the Jewish people in Israel for the American Jewry, and that's something that continues and consists. I feel like giving them that experience as well, and then letting them go back to Israel and say, we're not alone in this. We have people on the other side of the ocean that supports us and feels the same way and care for us, I think is as valuable as for them to come here and share their story. I am very, very grateful for this opportunity. And a lot of it is thanks to Jeff and Zena here that on this Zoom to make that happen. And being agreeable to host this craziness in less than a week and organize everything. And I'm grateful for everybody who was able to participate and came to show this support, to hear their stories and to continue, to continue the fight, the struggle, and to not give up. And in the spirit of Hanukkah and in the spirit of sharing light when it's dark, it couldn't be more fitting. It couldn't be more metaphorical. And a day after the delegation, we also hosted our community candlelighting and mosaic, which was just as valuable, seeing everybody coming together, lighting a menorah and mosaic. That gave me a lot of strength. That gave me a lot of comfort. That gave me a lot of, almost like a renewal energy to continue. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I think that was a very bright spot in very dark times. Anybody else likes to share their experience from the delegation or from the candle lighting? Were you able to participate in other candle lighting in the area? I know there's been a lot of them all over the Northern Virginia area.
Dean, I just want to add how grateful we are for you and the way you handled the delegation and the conversation. I've heard from a number of people who attended how impactful that event was, and your graciousness and your sensitivity in how you conducted those meetings and those conversations was a huge part of why they were successful and impactful. So I want to thank you. And I want to thank those on the call today who participated for being part of that important conversation. And can you just let people know if they want to watch the event, how they access that video?
Yes. So thank you. And if you want to watch the video, you can either go to the Pozez JCC's Facebook or Instagram, and that link is shared there, and you can just go and see it. It's on YouTube. And the other way you can do it is also go to Pozez JCC on YouTube, and it's going to be on the videos that were listed. I am also going to share the link for that and the link for the article from NBC to everybody who registered to this Zoom. I can have the email list and just share this with all of you. I'm going to share this with I think all the Israel interested list for the post event email. And also Amy shared this on the chat right now, so you can go see it. I encourage you to see it, not only for the event itself, but also Danielle, one of the delegates, who is a performer, he's a singer. He broke everybody when he sang. It was beautiful. It was, you could feel what he feels through his music, but it was also remarkable. And he is an amazing performer. I want to thank everybody for joining this session. We're going to conclude a bit earlier, but I'm going to stay on the Zoom if anybody else has more questions or stuff they want to talk about. I want us to keep focusing on the positive, even though it's hard. I know it's hard for me. And it's not always fair to ask from people something that you're not asking for yourself. So I'm going to try myself to also find positive stuffs. I'm definitely happy that Hanukkah is over, that we get some time to plan ahead and work on more stuff. And I'm really happy to see all of you, and I wish you all a better week than the one before. Have a great rest of your week, and it was lovely seeing you all.